Alright, let's get started. It says, today's study tip. Research shows that students perform better if they study in an environment similar to the room where they take the exam. So study in a room that is quiet with fluorescent lights and maybe too cold or too hot as in the Sequoia classroom. So I know that a lot of you like to study with music or the TV on or in your bed, but you should know that that is not the way that you are performing, right? That your performance is in the classroom with nobody talking, no headphones on, earbuds in, no TV. It's not very comfortable, and it's got 28 other people, sitting there flipping pages and coughing, and sneezing or whatever they're doing. So I totally get that some of you like to study with the music, but you should know that it's hurting you if you don't practice studying or practice writing or practice something in the silence, like an exam. I think it's going to work against you. Okay, so I happen to like it quiet when I study, and so it's perfect for the setup for an exam. But I did, when I was a student, I had roommates in college, UC Davis. I remember one place I lived had 6 girls staying in one house. And of course, nobody was studying at the same time. Some people were cooking, had friends over. So I started wearing earplugs, and I would study so that I tuned them out at my desk with the lamp on. And I had a professor told me about this study tip. And so I thought, I study, I do the desk and the lamp, but I do study with earplugs in. I'm going to bring my earplugs to class during the exam. And of course, you can do that and not get in trouble. Like, you can't bring your music, or your TV. So I just would put them in casually, take the exam, and it was so awesome because I'd put the earplugs in. I don't know if you've used earplugs, but they're little sponges. You roll them up into kind of a skinny little thin shape, stick shape, put them in your ear, and then you hold them in place with your mouth open. So this is one of the tricks to getting them to stay, is you have to open your mouth, open your jaw, and while your mouth is open, you know the word external auditory canal is open, and so you let the sponge fill up the space. Then when you close your mouth, it makes a tighter fit on the little sponge earplugs. I'm a big earplug fan. I mean, I've been using it ever since, and I sleep with earplugs because I have a loud house, and I think they're great. So if you haven't tried it and you like a quiet space and you're looking to kind of tune out everybody, think about doing earplugs. Okay? Let's see. Today's topic. Whoops. Chapter 13. Cardiophysiology. So we did blood last time. Now we're going to review the heart and talk about, the electrical activity of the heart, the mechanical activity of the heart. It's a big topic. Big, big, big. Here we go. So let's review our anatomy. So following along here, let's start on the left side. Which side is the left side? The left or the right is which side is the left? Okay, let's start here at the left ventricle. You have to memorize all this. If you don't remember it, get it in your brain now. Okay? Then you go through the left aortic stemming lunar valve, out the aorta. You're going to split to go to the lower extremities, upper extremities. Go through the tissues, and of course the blood is red because it's oxygenated. Picks up carbon dioxide, drops off oxygen, comes down from the superior and inferior vena cava to this chamber, which is the right atrium, then through this valve, the tricuspid valve, or you can, let's see how this goes down. Yeah, this side, this valve on the left side is the bicuspid valve, right? But the right, and sorry, also called the, what's this one called? Mitral valve, right? I'm trying to give you some time to think. It's hard when you don't have you next to me. The mitral valve is a little bit weaker than the tricuspid valve. Here's the tricuspid over here. So this is going into the right ventricle, out the semilunar valve, the pulmonary semilunar valve, out the left and right pulmonary arteries. And of course, remember these arteries are blue, and that's okay because they're going to the lungs where they're going to pick up oxygen, come back into the, which chamber is this? Left or right? To the left, and then through the bicuspid, also called the mitral. Also, you could call it the left, let's see, semilunar, left. What else can you call it? Is there another name for this? Left, right, tricuspid, bicuspid. Left, you call it the left atrioventricular valve. So there's 3 different names for this side. All right, boring. That's anatomy. This, exciting. Okay, this is a good picture to know. You're like, oh, I better mark that down. Write that down. Good picture to know. This is called the cardiac cycle. And what I want you to see, this is just looking at the left ventricle. So the left ventricle has, of course, the member in the previous picture. That's the one that's pushing the hardest. The thick myocardium layer is pushing it out into the aorta. So it's got to go all the way to your feet and back. So it's going to be a big squeeze. So let's look at the pressure then we have. The pressure on the left side is in the units of pressure is millimeters of mercury. So this is something you probably already know. If you take someone's blood pressure, it's 120/80. That's like the typical number. So when we say 120, we mean 120 millimeters of mercury, mmHg. Those are the units of pressure. And the same is true for like the barometric pressure. The pressure of the air sitting on top of you is 760. So that's a lot, right? So the pressure of the blood in the ventricle is 0 at the bottom here until we squeeze. So when we start systole, which is the squeezing, pressure goes up. And the squeezing or contraction, systole, means the pressure is going up. There's contraction at the same time that there is now going to be emptying, right? So there is a little point here, though, between these dotted lines. Do you see it at step 1? Where there's still fluid. Oh, sorry. On the left here, this is volume. So this is the amount. Okay, so you know your water bottles, those are 500 milliliters. So this is about, a fourth of that. So if you look here, it's at 120 milliliters. There's a time here when the ventricle starts to squeeze and the pressure builds, but there's still blood in the ventricle. And I can see that because the volume, this line stays straight. Then there's a point here where there's finally enough pressure to push it out, and the blood starts to leave to go into the aorta. And by the way, that pressure is needed to open the valve. You have to open the aortic semilunar valve, and there's blood in the aorta that you have to push against. So there's finally enough pressure when you get to about 100, and explodes out through the aorta, goes rushing out. And this is a lot of pressure. And it goes up until it hits a maximum, and it starts to fall down again, and that's because it's all the fluid is leaving. So not all of it leaves, though. Do you see the bottom? Still sits at about 40. So it doesn't completely empty. This amount that comes out during this time is what, maybe 60 to 80, something like that. Different person, different amount. The systole, though, is this time here of contraction. So instead of saying ventricular contraction, we're going to be official and say ventricular systole. Then as you, after you finish systole, there's a break. When there is no pressure, the ventricle is relaxing. That's called diastole. Say diastole. Now we say the diastolic pressure and the systolic blood pressure. But when you say the word diastole, it's not the same. It's diastole versus diastolic. Okay, so we will be doing in class blood pressures. We will be measuring someone's systolic and diastolic blood pressure. We will be doing it not on the ventricle, though, like this picture. We will be doing it, of course, on their arm, right, which is the brachial artery. The other thing I want you to see in this picture is there's a little blip at the end. Do you see this here, Jude? And this is the little blip that comes from when the atria contracts. So, of course, you know this already. The ventricles contract second after the atria contracts. So at the top chambers contract first, and the ventricles contract second. So when the atria squeezes and dumps its blood into the ventricle, there's a little increase in the pressure that happens from that. But most of the pressure is happening when the ventricle squeezes or goes through systole. And finally, the last part of, at the bottom, this red line is the heart sounds. Boom, 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 boom. Lub dub. The lub And the DUP, you should already know this too from anatomy. This is referring to the shutting of the atrioventricular valves on the first sound, and the second sound is the shutting of the semilunar valves. So if you have more hard sounds, it's because you can, there are people, of course, doctors, who can hear it really well. There's also machines that can set you up to hear other sounds. So any heart sound changes are called a murmur. Sometimes we just call it a murmur, and it's no problem. There's no fine. It just means sound. Sometimes a murmur can detect a problem. Okay, so let me show you. This, and then this list here, and then I'll show you the animation. Okay. So a systole is contraction of the heart. And we can be more specific and say atrial systole or ventricular systole. Diastole, say it again. Diastole is the relaxation of the heart. So the muscles relax. This is, you could be specific and say atrial diastole or ventricular diastole. So I want you to look at the textbook to compare the ventricular volumes and pressures. So that's the slide I just showed you. And the heart sounds are due to the valves closing. The lub is the atrioventricular valves, and the DUP is the semilunar valves. Okay, so let me show you this cardiac cycle animation.
Ventricular contraction causes the atrioventricular valves to close, which signals the beginning of ventricular systole. The semilunar valves were closed during the previous diastole and remain closed during this period. Continued ventricular contraction increases pressure in the ventricles above the pressure in the aorta and pulmonary trunk, causing the semilunar valves to open. When the ventricles relax and their pressures drop, blood flowing back toward the relaxed ventricles causes the semilunar valves to close, which is the beginning of ventricular diastole. Note that the atrioventricular valves remain closed. When the pressure in the ventricles becomes lower than the pressure in the atrioventricular valves open and blood flows into the relaxed ventricles. This accounts for most of the ventricular filling. The atria then contract and complete the ventricular filling.
Okay, the next thing, something you should already know from anatomy as well, is the conduction system of the heart. So remember, there's about 1% of the cardiac cells that are very specialized. They have electrical activity. They make up the sinoatrial node, which we call the SA node. Now in this class, remember you are going to write the word sinoatrial node, and you can put SA next to the word sinoatrial, and after that you can say SA. But at first you're going to show me that you know the word is sinoatrial node. Then the electrical activity of this sinoatrial node sends its stimulus, electrical stimulus, to all of the contractile cells in the top two atria. Okay, and both the left and the right get electrical signals from the SA node. And when they get the signal, it's just like we learned with neurons. There is a stimulus, and the stimulus causes sodium channels to open. Sodium channels open, you get the whole action potential happening inside of the cell, and you get calcium release, and you get actin, you get myosin, you get contraction, which you already know about. Okay, so these are, we're going to look in detail at these specialized cells, which are in yellow color, and the regular contractile cells. So the order of events, though, is that the sinoatrial node has a pace, sets a pace, it goes a certain pace of setting the electrical activity. There are neurons that touch it, parasympathetic and sympathetic neurons. Of course, you already know this from the very first day of class. Sinoatrial node controlled by parasympathetic then would make it go faster or slower. Parasympathetic would make it go slower. Sympathetic would make it go faster. So they get the signal, then they contract, then the signal goes to the atrioventricular node, which then holds on to the signal for a brief 0.1 seconds before it sends it on. And it's kind of its way of saying, okay, we're going to stop here, hold the signal so that we make sure that both atria fully contract before we send the signal on. So the signal goes then, after the AV nodal delay it's called, then it goes through the left and right bundle branches down to the bottom of the heart, which is called the apex, and then around the edges to the Purkinje fibers. When it goes here, this is called the bundle of His, right? You remember these words? When it reaches all of these cells, I like this picture because look at this side. It shows how thick it is, right? The left side being so thick because it has to squeeze so hard. And it shows the two valves here and the three over here for the tricuspid. Anyway, when these contractile cells, which there are so many of, get the signal, then they will contract. But only the yellow parts are the specialized 1% autorhythmic cells, we call them. The others are all contractile cells. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you this second animation on the conduction system of the heart, and then we'll talk about the autorhythmic cells in more detail.
Action potentials originate in the sinoatrial node and travel across the wall of the atrium from the sinoatrial node to the atrioventricular node. Action potentials pass slowly through the atrioventricular node to give the atria time to contract. They then pass rapidly along the atrioventricular bundle, which extends from the atrioventricular node through the fibrous skeleton into the interventricular septum. The atrioventricular bundle divides into right and left bundle branches, and action potentials descend rapidly to the apex of each ventricle along the bundle branches. Action potentials are carried by the Purkinje fibers from the bundle branches to the ventricular walls. The rapid conduction from the atrioventricular bundle to the ends of the Purkinje fibers allows the ventricular muscle cells to contract in unison, providing a strong contraction.
Okay, about the autorhythmic cells. They make electrical signals and command contractile cells. Okay, so they are 1% of the cells. They tell all the other, all the others, remember, are just cardiac tissue, short, branching, little cardiocytes. First, we start at the sinoatrial node. We have 70 to 80 depolarizations per minute. They just do this. Now, this number is different in different books. I want you to know my number. Yes, that's it. That's how it is, right? Each class, the teacher asks for a different. So you just do what he or she says and you're done. The sinoatrial node in my class goes 70 to 80 depolarizations per minute. This then signals all of the atrial cells to contract. Where does it go next? Atrioventricular node has its own pace of 40 to 60 depolarizations per minute. And when it gets a signal, it slows down, holds it, it's a 0.1 second AV nodal delay. Now the problem is, the AV node is second in line, and it's going 40 to 60. And the sinoatrial node, you can imagine this is how my family is, okay? We walk, my kid's in front of me. He doesn't want to go 70 to 80. I'm the mom, okay, the sinoatrial node. I'm making them walk 70 to 80 depolarizations per minute. My kids are in front of me. They don't want to go that fast. They want to walk 40 to 60. But we're crossing the street. Everyone needs to get going. So what do? I kind of, come on, push them along. We're walking, going 70 to 80 now. Get along. It's moving. Car is coming. So I set the pace, and then everyone else has to go the same pace when we cross the street, right? So the atrioventricular node, or like my kids, it would like to go 40 to 60 depolarizations per minute, but it can't because the pacemaker is telling it to go 70 to 80. So everyone goes 70 to 80 because the pacemaker makes it go. But if there was no pacemaker, so if mom is not there, my kids would go slower, right? So the atrioventricular node would go 40 to 60 on its own. We hope it never does, because we need everything to go at the same rate, right? We need the atria to go and contract, and we need the ventricle to go and contract. So we need them all to be at the same rate. But your body, kind of has, two arms in case one doesn't work, or two legs in case one doesn't work. And so it also has this setup. So in case there's ever a problem with the SA node, the AV node can at least be telling everybody what pace to go. So where does it go next? The bundle of His, the bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers. Purkinje also named after some dead person. Okay, so the Purkinje fibers, if you did not have a pacemaker, they would go at a rate of 20 to 40 depolarizations per minute. So that would be way too slow, right? So they don't usually go that pace because the pacemaker sets the 70 to 80 instead. The job of the Purkinje fibers is to signal the ventricular cells to contract. So you need a good pacemaker to coordinate events. If not, there is random excitation and contraction. This is called fibrillation. Have you heard of that word before? Like on TV? They use a defibrillator. A defibrillator actually puts electrical activity in the heart to shock the heart so that everything resets, so that hopefully they all go back to the normal rate of the SA node. What happens to blood flow through the heart if there's fibrillation? So if there's random contraction, maybe atria, ventricle, atria, ventricle, atria, what happens? What happens to blood flow? Goes the wrong way. Doesn't happen. And of course you can imagine if the blood flow is not going atria, ventricle, out, then the blood does not supply the body like it needs to, and of course the person will die. Okay? Let's see what I have for the next part. Oh yeah, the action potential. This is looking at an action potential, not like the one though that you've seen before. So when we did neurons, we plotted the same thing, millivolts versus time. These are the same, but notice our numbers are not quite as low. We're at minus 60, and they only go up to plus 20. This is the autorhythmic cells, the SA node, the AV node, the bundle of His, all those things automatically have what's called a pacemaker potential. So they have the ability to reach threshold all by themselves. There's no stimulus. It just goes. And since you were a little teeny embryo, just 6-week little teeny being, okay, your heart was already doing this, was already starting to beat. And this pacemaker potential is, of course, let me ask you, is this a depolarization or a repolarization? These channels called HCN channels, you don't have to know what that stands for. HCN channels allow for depolarization, right? Then we hit threshold. This is my mark, so if you look in the book, you won't see this. Threshold, and boom, like usual, same thing, more channels open. In this case, these are calcium channel. Okay, so voltage gated calcium channels open. Calcium comes in, then you get to plus 20. Calcium channels close, then our friend potassium channels open. Potassium leaks out, so you get depolarization. Then they close, then you get this HCN thing, and you just keep doing this over and over and over for your whole life. That's totally amazing to me, that stuff. Okay, so this is called the autorhythmic potential. Action potential of the autorhythmic cells. I need you to pretty much memorize this, be able to draw this from memory. Okay? Here are the steps of it. So we have our steps. So it's a big topic, obviously. Step 1, depolarization when we open the HCN channels. Step 2, we reach threshold. Then the voltage-gated calcium channels open, so you get more depolarization. You go up to plus 20. You repolarize when those calcium channels close and potassium channels open. Which way will potassium go then? In or out of the cell? Just like the neurons, okay? The potassium will efflux, go out, and we will repolarize until we get to the bottom. where the potassium channel is closed. Then we repeat, repeat, repeat. Got it? Okay, here's your question to work on. Your friend Rose tells you that her grandfather had a heart attack and had to have an artificial pacemaker surgically installed. Turns out her grandfather has a condition known as heart block. The cause of heart block is damage to the AV node. Answer the following questions about heart block. 1. What happens to the conduction of impulses to the ventricles during heart block? 2. Would the rate of contraction of the ventricular muscles change during heart block? And 3. How would a cardiologist fix this problem? Okay? So pause the show, start looking it up, see what you can find about this. Okay, so turns out heart block, there's different kinds of heart block. I gave you a story about AV nodal heart block, but there can be other spots. There could be an SA node or down the Purkinje fibers, so different spots. But for this one, if it's AV node, what happens to the conduction of impulses to the ventricles during heart block? So it gets stopped, right? And therefore, what rate would the ventricular muscles be going? See, usually everybody's supposed to go 70 to 80, right? 70 to 80 is what the atria will be going, but will the ventricles be getting the signal? No. So what rate will they be going? They'll probably be going 20 to 40. Now, because the AV node is not sending a signal, you just imagine like, a block, as it says, between the two atria and the two ventricles. So they're going to be out of sync. And of course, what's blood flow going to be like? Bad, right? So obviously there needs to be something done. What needs to be done? How would a cardiologist fix this problem? The answer is actually in the question, right? How do they do it? Yeah, with the artificial pacemaker, surgically installed. Very cool. The pacemaker can be set up to, record the SA node and go down to where the AV node block is, go past the block, and restart the bundle branches, the bundle of His, the bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers to go the same rate as the SA node. This is how awesome it is. So long ago, maybe not even 80 years ago, they wouldn't have been able to do this. Now they can do it so good, it's all done like a little teeny device, all done on a computer, so that they used to be able to give a pacemaker that had a pace, just set the pace. But there's no way that they could make it coordinate so that the SA node went with the bottom to go at different paces. Now you can exercise, and of course what's it going to do? Go faster. And when you sleep, it's going to go slower. But in the old days, a pacemaker, like in the 70s and 60s, would actually go fast when people were sleeping. Of course, you can't sleep when your heart's going fast, right? Now it's super awesome the way how they have all this set up. And before you know it, they'll just figure out how to replace the blocked neurons, right? Or not neurons, sorry. The blocked node, which is made of the autorhythmic cells. Let's see, what else do I want to say about this? I think that's it for my story. Let me know if you have any questions. This is the action potential of the contractile cell. So the other 99% of cells are contractile cells. This is what they look like. Now they would not contract unless they got a stimulus. So when they get the stimulus from the autorhythmic cell, we have the same thing. We have time in milliseconds. By the way, this is milliseconds. It's a lot longer than we learned for the neuron, right? The neuron was like 1 to 4. Right, 0 to 4 milliseconds. This is a lot longer. And this is a contractile cell. It sits at like minus 90, minus 85. Boom, goes up super fast. There's no threshold story here. It just goes. Calcium then is sodium up to plus 20. Then there's this change from the action potential where we have calcium now being open. Calcium channels open. Calcium slowly, comes in. Potassium then, this holds us, right, this is called a plateau. Then the calcium comes out and we fall down again. So this is called the calcium plateau. A plateau means flat, okay, like a table. Let's see, gotta look at my notes, what I'm going to put on the next page. Yeah, where's the calcium come from? Name the organelle that holds all the calcium in the cell. It's called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, right. So let's look at it. Let's write the steps now, okay? Contractile cell action potential. First, depolarization. Sodium influx. Okay, so that signal that they get from the autorhythmic cell tells this contractile cell to open up sodium channels. Sodium comes in, and you depolarize. Then you hold at the top with the plateau. Now the purpose of this long plateau is to give plenty of time for all these cells to contract, right? You don't want your heart contracting too fast. You want everything squeezed out of it, so plenty of time. So we delay this repolarization with the sarcoplasmic releasing calcium into the cytoplasm. Then the sodium channels close. There's this delay. Then the potassium channels open and you get a repolarization with potassium efflux. You got to get rid of the calcium. So remember the calcium, you already know the calcium, binding to troponin, move tropomyosin, the whole thing. Now the calcium, remember, in order to stop the contraction, has to be transported back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Same as muscle story there. It's cardiac tissue though. Okay, now I need you to memorize that picture that we just did, okay? I need you to memorize both of them. This is putting together the myocardial action potential that I just showed you. So the green line, there it is, right? Sodium in, plateau, potassium out, further repolarization. This red line is one that I showed you before. This is the latent period, the contraction phase, and the relaxation phase. So this is a muscle twitch. So what they are overlapping them to show you that the muscle cell, the cardiocyte of the heart, first it depolarizes, then remember all the calcium is released, and look at what happens to, this is looking at strength or force, tension. I don't know why they don't show you that. They should have another line on the right side here that says force or grams or strength or something, because you build the strength of the contraction while the same action potential is happening and the calcium plateau is happening. Okay, you build, then you're at your maximum, then you start to relax. Well, what causes the relaxing of the muscle? The relaxing is due to the repolarization, the calcium being pumped back into the cell, or into the SR, and then the calcium, no, I'm saying it wrong. The problem is in my head I see K. I see the letter K. And when you see a K, what do you say out loud? You say K, right? But it's not. It's a potassium when I see K. Okay, enough of that. Hopefully you are learning it better than me. So we repolarize and then we relax. We depolarize, then we contract. Easy. What I want you to see, the difference, one of the different things in this slide is that during this time here is the absolute refractory period. So remember we learned this before, you absolutely cannot, it's very, very long. The absolute refractory period is very long. The relative refractory period is very short because we do not want to stimulate the heart again. So when you contract, you've got to let it relax before you can make it go again, right? Because if you don't let it relax, if you do not let the heart relax, it won't fill up with blood, right? And if it doesn't fill, and you tell it to contract again, there's not going to be anything to squeeze out. Okay, so this is a good figure. Here's the highlights of it. The long refractory period allows full contraction of contractile cells. The other thing that I want you to know is that there is no tetanus or summation in contractile cells. So remember, in the muscle, we would hold, and then we would relax. You don't have that here. You never have that. That red line, it goes up, it contracts, and then it goes down. It relaxes. Contract, relax, contract, relax. We don't want the heart holding. Can you imagine that? Boom, 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 boom. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Okay? Animal dies when that happens. Anything else? Okay, those are the key points about the figure. I expect you to be able to draw them from memory. Okay, so start practice drawing. Fun fact, the average heart rate is 70 beats per minute. Our class was about that, right? 65, 70. By the time a person reaches 70 years of age, their heart will beat to, what is this number? Let's see, these are millions, billion. 2,575,440,000 times. Oh, there you go. And you're going to live to be 100, so there's going to be a lot more, huh? That's the wrong way, sorry. This is the picture of the EKG. So you already know this EKG from just being around, right? You've seen it, as everyone knows, an EKG. We call it an ECG, electrocardiogram. The C is for cardio. The K is also cardio, like German or something. So I think the general public knows an EKG. I need you to know what the wave looks like. I need you to be able to draw it, label it, tell me what's happening, and what else do I want you to know about it? I'll show you on the next slide. This P, Q, or S, T could have been A, B, C, D, E. They just, whoever they is, pick this, okay? You get this by putting little electrodes on a person's body. We could do it real simply with just 3. You could put one on each wrist and one on the ankle. It could be that simple. Or you can do what they call a 12-point lead, which is actually 10 stickers. So some of my students do this as a career while they're going to school. They bring in patient, put all the stickers on, set up the electrodes, do the recording, and they don't do anything with the information except pass it on, right? But it's a cool job. You get to see lots of interesting things. The PQRST is due to the electrical activity of the heart. So here they show a picture. Remember this one? The sodium, the calcium, the potassium. This is so strong. This is amazing to me too. You know, I'm easily amazed in this class. The electrical cells of your body, okay, the electrical activity of your body is so strong, not even your body, just your heart is so strong that you can read it on your skin at your wrists and ankles. Okay, so every contractile cell, remember, has this action potential, and shown in the red here. And when it does that, the signals are so strong that on your skin you get this little electrical activity that we call the electrocardiogram. And it's awesome because, like, it's not like a really invasive tool. It's easy to do. It's like listening to the heart. Doesn't scare anyone too much, doesn't hurt them in any way, but it can tell a lot from looking at it. The waves of the EKG, I'll just use my clicker here. The P wave is the depolarization of the atria. Okay, so when all of the cells of your atria depolarize, your skin reads this little blip. Okay, then, of course, the atria have to repolarize, but they do that at the same time that the ventricles depolarize. So that makes for kind of a messy wave that we measure, and we call it the QRS complex. You can't really divide the QRS complex into which one's which, so just trust me that as a unit, okay, the Q is at the bottom, so if we go back, the dip at the bottom here is the Q, or you can look up here, Q, then as you go up, it's R, down is S, okay? Then there is a space of time before the repolarization of the ventricles, and that's called the T wave. So remember, all these things are electrical, but we assume that if the atria are depolarizing, that immediately after they're contracting. That's called systole, right? And we assume that if the atria are repolarizing, then they're going through diastole. We assume that if we're depolarizing, there's systole of the ventricles, and then repolarization of the ventricles, they relax. That's diastole. So with this simple electrical tool, we can tell what's happening mechanically. Some things that might go wrong. This one is called ST depression. So the distance between the ST is supposed to be kind of flat. But here you see it go down in the S and then up to the T. This is a problem of myocardial ischemia. Okay, so myo means muscle, cardio, heart. Ischemia, it's like the word chemistry. Do you see that? C-H-E-M? Say ischemia. Ischemia, like chemistry. Yeah, so ischemia means a lack of oxygen. So there's lack of oxygen to the heart, and you can see it by the way the heart contracts and the electrical activity. Easy, super duper easy to tell. One time I did have a student who worked in this field, and he brought me some EKGs to look at. It was kind of fun. He showed me one where there was an EKG. Let's see, let's go back to the picture. There's one like this. It was like this. It was a long page like this. And it showed one EKG P, Q, or ST. And then it went straight, 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 straight. And then another one. And straight. Then another one. And so there was a P, Q, or ST. And then 6 seconds before the next one. And then another 6 seconds before the next one. Super duper long. And so the person's heart rate, was so slow. He's like, "Sir, how do you feel?" And he said, "I'm a little tired." He's like, "Yeah, I think I'm going to call the doctor right now." Every 6 seconds. Boom, boom. Can you imagine? Waiting. Boom, boom. Waiting. Not feeling too good, are you, sir? Abnormalities. What's the word for slow? The one I just gave you. The slow is called bradycardia. Fast is called tachycardia. A premature beat called an extrasystole. Now, by age 70, everyone has one of these, and you can feel it. You can just put your hand on your chest and you can feel this. So it goes boom, 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 and it's not uncommon. It just happens with age. It's called an extrasystole. Cardiac myopathies. Again, myo muscle, right? Or any heart muscle damage. So it could be due to a heart attack or all kinds of things like that. Okay? I think that's all I have. Yeah, being a cardiologist or working for a cardiologist would be a lot of fun. All right, I'm done. Thank you.